The human immune system is the most complex biological system we know after the human brain, and yet most of us never learn how it works, or what it is. Your immune system consists of hundreds of tiny and 2 large organs. It has its own transport network spread throughout your body. Every day, it makes hundreds of billions of fresh cells organized like an army, with soldiers, captains, intelligence officers, heavy weapons, and crazy suicide bombers. It's not some sort of abstract entity. Your immune system is you. Your biology protecting you from the billions of microorganisms that want to consume you and from your own perverted cells that turn into cancer. It's so manifold that it's impossible to cover in one video, so we'll make a series looking at different aspects of it. Today, what happens when your body is invaded and your first lines of defenses are engaged in a fight for life and death? It's been a normal day, when suddenly the world explodes and an asteroid rips the sky open. Countless alien life forms invade, ready to destroy cities and infrastructure and eat civilians. Or this is what your cells experience. You look at your bleeding thumb that you just cut on a dirty twig in the park. How annoying. But inside the wound, a horrible catastrophe has happened. There are dead cells and blood and dirt everywhere. Even worse, countless bacteria invade the warm caverns between your helpless cells to explore their new home, steal your resources, and poop everywhere. Immediately, the first stage of your defense kicks in. The cells that survived the impact or are hurt or dying scream in panic, releasing an onslaught of chemical alarm signals that awaken your immune system. The first cells to show up are macrophages. If an average cell were the size of a human, a macrophage would be the size of a black rhino. A stoic cell in principle, but you wouldn't want to annoy it. Bacteria do annoy them. Within seconds, the large cells attack and begin killing them without mercy. They stretch out parts like the arms of an octopus and grab the bacteria to swallow them whole and digest them alive. A macrophage can eat 100 bacteria before it's exhausted. But there are too many enemies, so the macrophages call for reinforcements. In your blood, hundreds of thousands of neutrophils pick up their signals and move to the battlefield. Neutrophils are intense suicide warriors that only live to kill. They're so enthusiastic about killing that they kill themselves a few days after birth, so they don't have time to accidentally destroy your body from the inside. As soon as neutrophils arrive, they begin vomiting deadly chemicals at bacteria or devour them. They are so careless in their attacks that they are causing real damage to your own cells, but collateral damage is not their concern now. Or ever. Some neutrophils go so far to push their suicide button and explode, casting wide and toxic nets made from their own DNA filled with deadly chemicals that trap and kill bacteria. Sometimes they can continue fighting after that, even though they're sort of dead already. This is how much fun they have killing. While the battle rages, your blood vessels let fluid stream into the battlefield like a dam opening up towards a valley. You notice this as inflammation. Your thumb swells up a little and gets red and warm. The fluid brings a silent killer into the battle zone, millions of complement proteins. A sort of automated liquid weapon that stuns and kills bacteria by ripping holes into them. We made a whole video explaining them in detail. We're reaching a crossroad now. If things go well, your first line of defense kills the invaders quickly. But sometimes, the enemies are too strong and would overwhelm your defenses eventually, which means certain death for you, the human. This is the hour of the dendritic cell, your immune system's intelligence officer. While your soldiers were bashing in heads, it was collecting samples by ripping bacteria into tiny parts and covering itself in it. Like a soldier decorating itself in the guts of a dead enemy. The cell leaves the battlefield and enters the superhighway of your immune system that connects all your tissues with your immune headquarters, your lymph nodes. The dendritic cell coming from the battlefield is looking for a helper T cell, which is a sort of all-purpose commander cell within your immune army. But not any helper T cell, one that happens to have just the right weapon for the bacteria that infected your wound. So it goes around and rubs itself, still covered in bacteria parts, against every helper T cell it meets. Most T cells are a bit disgusted and not interested, but after a few hours, something clicks. A helper T cell recognizes the bacteria parts. This cell is the weapon that's needed right now. The dendritic cell is overjoyed and activates the helper T cell. Okay, wait. How come your immune system has a cell that has a weapon against the specific bacteria that infected you? Well, your immune system has a perfect weapon against every possible disease in the universe, against the Black Death, the coronavirus, or an infection that will emerge in 100 years on Mars. We'll talk about this a bit more in the next video because it's very complex, so for now, just know that you have billions of unique helper T cells that each have weapons against every possible enemy. After the right T cell is activated, your second line of defense awakes and rises like a teenager that needs to get up on a school day, very slowly. Your heavy weapons are incredibly effective, but they're not fast. The activated helper T cell begins to clone itself over and over again. 1 becomes 2, 2 become 4, until there are thousands of them. Now they split into 2 groups. The first group quickly moves to help out your soldiers. At the battlefield, things are getting out of hand. A tired macrophage is ready to give up. After fighting for days, it just wants to go to sleep, like many of its buddies have done already. But now the helper T cells arrive. One of them comes to the tired macrophage and whispers something using special chemical signals. In a heartbeat, the demoralized soldier feels fresh again. But there's something else. A hot, white anger. The macrophage knows what it needs to do. Kill. Invigorated, it throws itself against the enemies once again. All over the battlefield, this begins to happen. Meanwhile, the second group of helper T cells was working on activating another line of defense, B cells, your antibody factories. Antibodies are protein superweapons that look like tiny crabs with 2 pincers to grab enemies. Just like the helper T cells, there are B cells in your body that are able to make just the right antibodies for every possible enemy. And the helper T cell is looking for exactly these B cells. After a day or 2, the right B cell is found and begins to clone itself. As soon as enough clones have been made, each B cell begins pumping out up to 2,000 antibodies per second. About a week after you injured yourself and bacteria invaded, your second line of defense finally arrives in full force. The tiny army begins to saturate the battlefield, pinching and stunning desperate bacteria. The antibodies clump them together and make them unable to move or fight, while your soldiers massacre the defenseless victims. The tide is turning fast. As the last enemies are cleaned up, your soldiers realize they are no longer needed and begin to kill themselves to save resources. But not all of them. A few helper T cells remain and turn into memory cells. They will guard the tissue for years, making sure the same bacteria will never again gain a foothold here. Similarly, a few B cells will stay alive and keep producing a low amount of antibodies, making you immune against this bacteria, maybe for the rest of your life. One day you wake up and notice that the wound has grown over and left nothing but a faint red mark. You were completely unaware of the drama your cells had to deal with. For you, the whole ordeal was a slight annoyance, while for millions of cells, it was a desperate fight for life and death. But this is just the beginning of the epic story that unfolds inside you every day and is told in full in Immune, a journey into the mysterious system that keeps you alive, written by Philipp Detmer, the founder and head writer of Kurzgesagt. The book is a beautifully illustrated deep dive into the immune system, the most important thing you don't know enough about that will forever change how you think about your body. Written to be as simple and fun as possible, it's been an ongoing passion project for almost a decade.
Oke, jadi lanjut deh video berikutnya. Oke, ini video selanjutnya.
A mosquito lands on your arm, injects its chemicals into your skin, and begins to feed. You wouldn't even know it was there if not for the red lump that appears, accompanied by a telltale itch. It's a nuisance, but that bump is an important signal that you're protected by your immune system, your body's major safeguard against infection, illness, and disease. This system is a vast network of cells, tissues, and organs that coordinate your body's defenses against any threats to your health. Without it, you'd be exposed to billions of bacteria, viruses, and toxins that could make something as minor as a paper cut or a seasonal cold fatal. The immune system relies on millions of defensive white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, that originate in our bone marrow. These cells migrate into the bloodstream and the lymphatic system, a network of vessels which helps clear bodily toxins and waste. Our bodies are teeming with leukocytes. There are between 4,000 and 11,000 in every microliter of blood. As they move around, leukocytes work like security personnel, constantly screening the blood, tissues, and organs for suspicious signs. This system mainly relies on cues called antigens. These molecular traces on the surface of pathogens and other foreign substances betray the presence of invaders. As soon as the leukocytes detect them, it takes only minutes for the body's protective immune response to kick in. Threats to our bodies are hugely variable, so the immune response has to be equally adaptable. That means relying on many different types of leukocytes to tackle threats in different ways. Despite this diversity, we classify leukocytes in two main cellular groups, which coordinate a two-pronged attack. First, phagocytes trigger the immune response by sending macrophages and dendritic cells into the blood. As these circulate, they destroy any foreign cells they encounter, simply by consuming them. That allows phagocytes to identify the antigen on the invaders they just ingested and transmit this information to the second major cell group orchestrating the defense, the lymphocytes. A group of lymphocyte cells called T cells go in search of infected body cells and swiftly kill them off. Meanwhile, B cells and helper T cells use the information gathered from the unique antigens to start producing special proteins called antibodies. This is the pièce de résistance. Each antigen has a unique matching antibody that can latch onto it like a lock and key and destroy the invading cells. B cells can produce millions of these, which then cycle through the body and attack the invaders until the worst of the threat is neutralized. While all of this is going on, familiar symptoms like high temperatures and swelling are actually processes designed to aid the immune response. A warmer body makes it harder for bacteria and viruses to reproduce and spread because they're temperature sensitive. And when body cells are damaged, they release chemicals that make fluid leak into the surrounding tissues, causing swelling. That also attracts phagocytes, which consume the invaders and the damaged cells. Usually, an immune response will eradicate a threat within a few days. It won't always stop you from getting ill, but that's not its purpose. Its actual job is to stop a threat from escalating to dangerous levels inside your body. And through constant surveillance over time, the immune system provides another benefit. It helps us develop long-term immunity. When B and T cells identify antigens, they can use that information to recognize invaders in the future. So when a threat revisits, the cells can swiftly deploy the right antibodies to tackle it before it affects any more cells. That's how you can develop immunity to certain diseases, like chickenpox. It doesn't always work so well. Some people have autoimmune diseases, which trick the immune system into attacking the body's own perfectly healthy cells. No one knows exactly what causes them, but these disorders sabotage the immune system to varying degrees and underlie problems like arthritis, type 1 diabetes, and multiple sclerosis. For most individuals, however, a healthy immune system will successfully fight off an estimated 300 colds and innumerable other potential infections over the course of a lifetime. Without it, those threats would escalate into something far more dangerous. So the next time you catch a cold or scratch a mosquito bite, think of the immune system. We owe it our lives. TED-Ed is a nonprofit. If you value our work, please consider.
Oke, ini video terakhir. Video ketiga. Oh, ini. Sebentar. Ya, ini video ketiga. Ini video terakhir. Ntar ini gue maksimalin.
There's this idea floating around that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, that surviving a disease leaves you better off. And it seems to make sense because we've all experienced this. When you go through hardship, often you come out more resilient, more ready to face a difficult situation in the future. But it turns out that sometimes what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. So what happens when you get sick? The machinery of war. Think of yourself as a large country with a sizable army to defend it. You're surrounded by enemies that want to take your land, your energy, your resources. This is a matter of life and death, so your body evolved to be sensitive to damage and to the presence of enemies. Because this means that an invasion might happen at any moment and that it has to act fast. Let's start an invasion and see what happens. The moment your cells notice that something is off, they release an onslaught of signal proteins called cytokines. They're like air raid sirens that activate all sorts of immune cells that then themselves release many more cytokines, amplifying the alarm. Soon, you're flooded with signals that trigger precautions and countermeasures. Mobilization is underway. Your brain activates sickness behavior and reorganizes your body's priorities to defense. The first thing you notice is that your energy level drops and you get sleepy. You feel apathetic, often anxious or down, and you lose your appetite. Your sensitivity to pain is heightened and you seek out rest. All of this serves to save your energy and reroute it into your immune response. You become a country under attack, switching into a war economy, because properly activating your immune system is intensely disruptive and draining. Just like war is expensive for a country as industry switches to building tanks, your immune system demands huge amounts of energy, amino acids, and microelements to build its weapons. Take fever. It speeds up your metabolism and makes your cells work harder and faster while creating heat that's pretty stressful for many invaders, but it uses up a lot of calories to maintain. Then your immune system begins to clone millions of specialized immune cells to respond specifically to the enemy infecting you. B cells produce millions of antibodies every second, each requiring hundreds of amino acids to construct. Billions or even trillions of proteins need to be made to refresh the complement system, a minefield inside your blood. Cytokines, the mobilization and information signals, also need constant refreshing. Usually, you acquire your resources by eating. But when you're sick, your body slows down your digestion because it needs a lot of energy you can't spare. So it reaches for the easiest source of amino acids and starts breaking down your muscles. All that muscle that you worked so hard for is sacrificed to keep you alive. If you're young and healthy and fit, you'll make up for that quickly once you're better. But if you're old or very young, weak or suffer from chronic illness, this may be way too draining. Your body is literally consuming itself to keep the defense going. If your whole system is already strained, when you get sick, just keeping your immune responses going can overwhelm your capacities. Your immune system is a jerk, our enemies too. Your immune system is as dangerous to you as it is to enemies. There's a very fragile balance between the damage caused by an infection and the collateral damage caused by immune cells. One of your first responders are neutrophils. Imagine crazy aggressive chimps with machine guns. If a neutrophil encounters enemies, it showers them with chemicals that cut them open, but can also damage civilian cells, especially if the patient is already compromised, for example by smoking. On top of that, the microorganisms that invade you often release chemicals and toxins that can cause significant damage and cell death. So a serious infection often causes many tiny wounds, literally holes in your organs. As you can imagine, it's not great to have holes and wounds in your organs, and your body rushes to close them. Your neutrophils and macrophages help by releasing chemicals that signal the body to start repairs, and most of the damage is quickly filled up with regrowing cells. But others are filled with collagen, a sort of fixal organic cement that gives your gooey tissue structural integrity. You've seen the result on your skin as scars. A scar is different from the original tissue. It has no functioning cells in it, it's like a sloppily applied cement patch. It can't do what the original tissue was doing. A scar on your heart makes it beat a tiny bit weaker. A scar on the lungs no longer captures oxygen. A scar on your liver makes it a worse filter. And so as you go through life and survive serious disease after serious disease, the functionality of your organs may decrease. The damage is usually small enough not to affect your quality of life, but can be permanent. Okay, this sounds depressing, but there is actually something you can do to avoid a lot of this damage and train your immune system. The best way to train your immune system. Your immune system is unique. Everyone has a slightly different immune system that's stronger against some enemies and weaker against others, which makes evolutionary sense, as this protects our species from being wiped out by a single infection. Collectively, the immune system of the human species is a spectrum. Most people respond well enough to an infection, a few are super responders, and a few don't respond well and die. Some people survive the Black Death, are more resistant to HIV or coronavirus, or even resistant against Ebola. Others are killed easily by the flu or are highly vulnerable to certain bacterial infections. Where you are on this spectrum is impossible to predict, and you also respond differently to every possible infection. This is why seemingly very healthy young people died from COVID, while for some elderly people it was more like a mild flu. The idea that you can weather all sorts of diseases if you never get a cold is wrong. You never know what your immune system is good at until it's tested. Getting sick is a gamble in life's casino with your health on the line. Always. But there is something you can do, hacking one of the best features of your immune system. When you survive a disease, usually you have better defenses against it afterwards. You gain memory cells that are very good at killing the specific enemy you fought that day. So you either don't get the disease again, or the next infection is much milder. And you can use an incredible achievement of human ingenuity that taps into this mechanism to prevent damage from disease and train your immune system. Vaccines. Vaccines basically pretend to be a disease and train your defenses to be ready if it ever shows up for real. The goal is to create the same memory cells that you would get after surviving an infection. But if you can feel some side effects, why should you still do it? Nature versus Vaccine Dojo. You have two options to train your immune system: Vaccine Dojo and Nature Dojo. In Vaccine Dojo, you train with paper weapons and learn to defend yourself. Sure, you might get a black eye or a bruise. Sometimes after a vaccine, you get sick for a few days, but that's generally it. No scars, no permanent damage. We discussed vaccine side effects in detail in another video if you want to learn more. On the other hand, getting a disease to become immune means going to a nature dojo. In Nature Dojo, you train with real weapons, sharp knives and swords. Things might still work out, but with way more cuts and wounds. But from time to time, someone will die, be it a kid from measles or an adult from influenza. Nature Dojo is just way more risky. On top of that, the immunity you get from a vaccine is often better than the natural resistance because they're engineered to engage your immune system in a more productive way. Of course, vaccines are not magic, and sometimes they don't protect us as well as we'd like them to. Maybe because an enemy mutates too quickly, like the Omicron coronavirus, or because your specific immune system does not respond well to the vaccine and builds less of a defense. Still, being vaccinated is one of the best tools to train your natural defenses. In the end, if we look at the stunning progress humanity has made in the last century, eventually we may overcome disease for good. But until then, we can do our best to take care of ourselves and others. Your body and your older self will be grateful to you. Diseases are not the only problem humanity can address if we work together. We believe the same is true for climate change, one of the main challenges of our generation. We're very passionate about this topic, and we've covered it extensively in previous.
Oke, jadi sekarang siapa yang mau ngomong dulu? Kayak apa yang lu dapetin gitu? Ini siapa yang mau ngomong dulu? Ya udah deh, gue dulu deh. Jadi sebenarnya kalau dari video yang gue tonton itu apa yang paling gue dapetin itu tentang apa ya, kayak berbanding kayak sistem imun itu ternyata kerjanya itu kayak sistematis gitu. Maksud gue nggak kayak misalnya ada terjadi infeksi, ada patogen gitu, nggak kayak langsung semuanya datang terus semua sel langsung seruduk gitu. Tapi misalnya ada yang pertama dulu tadi kalau nggak salah ada makrofag, lalu baru dia ngaktifin limfosit gitu. Jadi artinya ada prosesnya begitu. Jadi enggak terjadi langsung. Terus kemudian prosesnya itu cuma terjadi kalau misalnya sebelumnya itu kalau misalnya sistem garis pertahanan yang lebih di depan itu gagal gitu. Sama paling sih satu lagi yang gue dapetin itu sistem imun itu kalau jadi kayak logikanya begitu ada infeksi itu kayak jadi prioritas tubuh gitu, semuanya tubuh pasti semua energi semuanya dialokasiin buat sistem imun. Terus kalau hal yang menarik ya nah sekarang tunggu yang lain dulu deh, yang lain apa yang paling lu dapetin kayak yang ditambahin mungkin. Ya.
Jadi kalau misalnya kayak hal menariknya itu mungkin yang dari video ketiga sih, ya, secara untuk tadi istilahnya sih di hack gitu lah, sistem imunnya di hack biar bisa I guess lebih efektif gitu untuk infeksi yang mungkin akan terjadi dalam masa depan, yang mungkin kita sendiri juga belum pernah terinfeksi oleh virusnya itu atau penyakitnya itu gitu. Jadi kayak bisa ya tanda kutip diinfeksikan secara artificial gitu. Jadi bisa melatih sistem imunnya untuk melawan infeksinya itu jika infeksinya itu terjadi di masa depan. Berikut kayak gitu.
Kalau gue sih sebenarnya virus itu yang menarik gue tahu dan gue dapatkan di paling kalau reaksi tubuh orang-orang tuh beda, memang berbeda dengan virus. Ada yang misalkan kena coronavirus bisa efeknya gede banget, tapi kalau misalkan kena yang lain influenza bisa malah sedikit, tapi berbeda yang lain. Jadi kayak gue baru tahu kalau ternyata setiap orang tuh reaksi ke tiap jenis virus juga berbeda-beda.
Kalau gue sih lebih ke arah vaksin. Soalnya kan ya cara lawan virus itu bisa pakai vaksin. Cara vaksinnya itu sebenarnya kan bikin sel-sel tubuh kita mengenali virus-virusnya, tapi virusnya itu udah di semacam modifikasi biar dia nggak berbahaya bagi tubuh kita. Jadinya kita itu sel-sel membuat semacam anti imun atau sistem imun yang udah mengenal virus itu. Jadi kalau misal virus itu masuk, virus benerannya yang berbahaya gitu masuk, bisa dibunuh semua. Soalnya kan gue juga dulu mungkin pernah divaksin TBC, jadi gue bisa tahu bisa aman dari TBC.
Oke. Oke. Tunggu, sorry. Oke, jadi
tapi gini loh.
kenapa?
Sorry, gue mau nambahin.
Ya.
Kan COVID ini kan nyebarnya cepet banget. Gue itu masih bingung apa COVID bisa nyebar cepet kayak ya virus itu terbandingin sama virus-virus yang lain yang kayak TBC, influenza gitu-gitu. Terus influenza juga nggak bisa dipertahankan dari imun tubuh. Makanya banyak yang kasus meninggal dari influenza bandingin COVID itu misalnya.
Oke.
Gue cuma mau tahu itu doang.
Oke. Gue paham sih. Cuman yang yang mungkin pengen gue tahu itu sebenarnya tentang yang tadi tentang vaksin itu yang Joey bilang. Vaksin itu kan sebenarnya kan ada efek samping. Nah menurut gue itu apakah efek samping vaksin itu kan jelas ya untuk melawan sistem imun, tapi apakah vaksin itu kayak ada vaksin yang efek sampingnya kan berat gitu ya. Nah maksud gue itu apakah berarti artinya bukan virus, dummy atau replika virus yang ada di dalam vaksin itu kayak memang lebih berat dari biasanya untuk tubuh lawan gitu, sehingga tubuh seolah-olah kayak try hard bener-bener ngelawan beneran, padahal itu udah jelas itu ringan banget untuk dilawan gitu sih. Jadi kayak seberapa, ya itu sih yang pengen gue tahu. Jadi apakah memang kayak jenis virus itu mempengaruhi jenis virus yang dilemahkan, ya jelas dilemahkan, tapi maksud gue jenis virus yang dilemahkan itu apakah dia mempengaruhi reaksi apakah mempengaruhi seberapa kuat gitu gejala yang ditimbulkan tubuh saat divaksin gitu. Kalau dari yang lain gimana? Yang mau ditahuin apa?
Kalau gue mikir sama yang lo tahu itu, menurut gue kayak mungkin efek sampingnya itu bisa dari sistem imun tubuh itu melawan waktu kan pasti kalau melawan virus dia ada efek samping tubuh, misalnya kayak demam gitu, efek samping kecil demam. Nah bisa aja kalau yang gede mungkin dia melawan dia sampai bisa melukai tubuh sendiri pada saat dia melindungi tubuh pada saat membunuh virus-virusnya, padahal virusnya udah nggak berbahaya ya. Atau nggak bisa juga dari virus yang waktu dilemahin masih ada sisa-sisa efek yang bisa tetap membahayakan tubuh gitu kayaknya.
Ya masuk akal sih. Kalau dari Andreas sama Adhi ada yang pengen ketahuin nggak?
Kalau gue sih kan tadi kalau kita nonton kan kita kan cara mau misalkan ada kita di nyamuk atau terkena luka terus ada kotoran masuk, nah kan pasti kalau ditunjukkan nggak itu doang dong yang ada kan. Kalau gue sih pengen tahu yang lain tuh kayak gimana sih caranya. Kalau misalkan ada kejadian yang misalkan lebih kompleks gitu yang terjadi pada tubuh kita. Jadi gue pengen tahu gimana cara tubuh kita tuh menangani berbagai macam kendala yang bisa terjadi pada tubuh kita.
Oke.
Mungkin kalau dari gue yang pengen gue tahu sih kayak kan kita tahu vaksin COVID itu kan kayak 2 atau 3 dosis gitu kan. Kenapa ada dosisnya itu sampai banyak gitu, apa karena mutasinya COVID gitu atau memang butuh 3 gitu biar efektif? kan dua itu yang main shop kan, yang main bisnis. Sekarang satu lagi bisnis. Kayak apakah dua shop itu dua dosis itu karena adanya mutasinya COVID itu, atau memang biar efektif dibutuhkan dua, dan apakah booster itu sebenarnya memang dibutuhkan untuk mempertahankan keefektifan vaksinnya, atau sebenarnya itu kalau misalkan nggak diambil nggak apa-apa gitu, tapi nanti di masa depan perlu mengambil vaksin lagi atau enggak.
Kalau gue tambahin dari yang punya Adhi sih, ini cuma jawaban gue ya. Pikiran gue itu, kalau misalnya lu kan vaksin itu sebenarnya untuk mengenalkan tubuh itu tentang tentang virus yang mungkin menyerang. Tapi itu cuma dummy kan. Tapi maksud gue gini, kalau tubuh emang oke, tubuh bakal nyimpen itu dalam memori jelas. Tapi apakah tubuh itu bakal tahu gitu, apakah tubuh itu memang akan terinfeksi gitu dalam waktu misalnya kayak 10 tahun setelah divaksin. Kalau nggak terinfeksi lagi, mungkin nanti setelah memorinya udah hilang, tubuh udah nggak nginget lagi itu virus. Dan mungkin begitu masuk, tubuh udah nggak ingat apa yang harus dilakukan gitu. Jadi kalau menurut gua, sebenarnya apakah booster memperkuat? Kalau mutasi mungkin aja sih, karena kan tadi di video juga sempat dibilang. Tapi kalau terkait kenapa harus ulang lagi, itu mungkin karena itu ya, kalau udah lama lu nggak kena, ya tubuh lu bakal ngelupain itu, dan lu nggak jadi imun lagi gitu. Nah terus sekarang ada yang menarik gak dari video yang tadi, kayak penjelasannya gitu atau perbandingannya gitu?
Yang jelas sih animasinya itu emang menarik banget. Kenapa jadi lebih ngerti ya, soalnya ada ilustrasi jelas, jadi kita bisa tahu misalnya gimana vaksin itu mengenalkan tubuh, gimana virus itu bakal masuk.
Oke. Kalau gue yang menarik, ya udah Andre dulu. Oh ya udah. Kalau dari gue sih yang menarik itu sebenarnya sih yang kayak dia membandingkan tentang sistem pertahanan tubuh sama militer gitu, kayak negara yang perang. Ya masuk akal sih, misalnya kayak negara yang lagi perang gitu, dia pasti semua budgetnya semuanya ke militer, dan mungkin jadi kayak pendidikan atau kesehatan jadi kurang. Sama ini kayak tubuh, kayak semuanya dialihkan ke sistem imun, sehingga bahkan energi dari alat gerak pun di sacrifice gitu, cuman buat sistem imun. Tapi emang penting gitu supaya sel-sel tubuh bisa mempertahankan kehidupannya. Jadi kalau menurut gue yang menarik sih itu sih, jadi masuk akal analoginya gitu penjelasannya.
Kalau gue sih sebenarnya ya mirip-mirip analoginya kan dari analogi. Jadi kalau gue tuh yang waktu awal di video yang dari kapan di atmosfer, tiba-tiba kita terus masuk alien gitu. Nah, kan dia jelasin nanti ternyata di sel itu ternyata kejadiannya seperti ini. Dan gue baru nyadar ternyata nggak sesimpel itu, ternyata sekompleks itu. Kalau kita tuh nggak cuma sobek doang, tapi ternyata sel itu berjuang mati-matian jadi bisa dari kita dari infeksi gitu. Kalau sih
Kalau gue sih ya kurang lebih mirip sama kayak punya Matthew sih, karena dengan analogi militernya itu, dan gue sebagai seorang yang memang sebagai military enthusiast gitu ya, yang suka militer itu gue jadi jauh lebih ngerti gitu lah. Karena kalau dianalogikan seperti itu ya make sense gitu, dari central command ke prajuritnya yang di front line-nya gitu lah, yang di pertahanan pertama gitu, dan pertahanan pertama itu jadi ngandal lah gitu sebagai analogi gitu, gimana itu dari pertahanan pertama ke pertahanan kedua ke pusatnya gitu, dan proses yang harus dilalui untuk mengaktifasi lah gitu, kayak pertahanan kedua, garis pertahanan kedua jika garis pertahanan pertama udah jatuh gitu lah. Kalau gue sih kayak gitu.
Oke. Mungkin satu lagi sih yang menarik sama gue, yang pengen benar gue tahu itu tentang yang alergi sih. Sebenarnya kan alergi itu termasuk salah satu hal yang lain ya dalam sistem imun, karena sel-sel tubuh gini, sebenarnya bukan cuma alergi tapi autoimun juga. Kan autoimun kan berarti sel-sel tubuh itu kan dia kayak yang sehat aja diserang gitu sama sistem imun, kayak bukan benda asing loh, sel tubuh yang sehat aja diserang. Terus abis itu sama alergi, kayak benda asing yang masuk tapi dia nggak berbahaya pun juga diserang gitu. Jadi yang menarik sama yang gue itu sebenarnya tentang eh, patokan tubuh buat kayak standarnya sel-sel tubuh buat yang termasuk membahayakan, yang termasuk harus dibunuh itu kayak gimana gitu. Karena kan ternyata setiap orang aja tubuhnya beda-beda gitu ya. Maksudnya em, terkait responnya sama benda asing yang tidak membahayakan atau bahkan responnya terhadap sel tubuh itu sendiri gitu. Gitu sih. Kenapa sel tubuh sendiri bisa diserang gitu loh. Itu kan berarti artinya ada yang nggak benar, ada yang nggak beres gitu. Ada yang nambahin nggak?
Mungkin gue bisa nambahin Matt, kalau masalah yang imun sistem yang menyerang tubuh sendiri atau kayak bahan-bahan atau benda-benda yang tidak berbahaya yang masuk ke tubuh, misalnya kayak bahan makanan gitu lah ya. Itu mungkin masalah, ya benar, udah masalah di imun sistemnya sendiri. Soalnya mungkin imun sistemnya itu gagal mendeteksi, maksudnya kayak dia salah, tanda kutip salah paham, salah kaprah kalau ini tuh sebenarnya bendanya tidak berbahaya, tapi masih dianggap asing, jadi masih tetap diserang meskipun itu tidak berbahaya. Jadi apapun yang tidak asing itu tidak dikenal sama tubuh samsat. Atau tiba-tiba misalnya kulit, kan ada tuh yang imun sistem menyerang tubuh sendiri, terus di kulit jadinya kulit merah-merah atau apa gitu. Mungkin karena keasingannya itu sel-sel tubuh itu dilupakan atau di luar deteksi dari imun.
Ya. Oke. Tapi nggak semua maksud gua kalau benda asing tapi oke, benda asing benar tapi nggak semua gitu. Benda asingnya pun nggak semua gitu. Jadi kayak ada yang iya, ada yang enggak gitu. Itu yang gua maksud.
Ada yang enggak. Mungkin bahan berbahaya biasa yang di itu.
Iya, cuman yang pengen gua tahu
pasti.
kenapa?
Oh,
Enggak, maksud gua
cuman virus sama bakteri kayak.
cuman virus sama bakteri. Kagak sih, makanan. Maksud gua ke alergi gitu lah. Alergi.
Kalau alergi, kalau gua mungkin pernah, iya, gua mungkin bisa cerita soal alergi. Soalnya kan dulu gua pernah treatment alergi di Singapura. Itu kayak semacam disuntikin di belakang punggung ya. Ini mungkin disuntik atau nggak tahu, bukan disuntik, di bagian punggung nggak tahu di mananya, soalnya gua nggak bisa lihat. Itu ditancapin semacam suntik, tapi lama. Nah itu mungkin dimasukin semacam anti apa yang memblokir imun sistem untuk menyerang bahan sel tertentu yang di tubuh kita. Soalnya kan dulu gue habis makan seafood, misalnya kayak seafood, telur, kadang gitu. Biar dia nggak menyerang sendiri. Kalau misalnya kita makan seafood, ada apa yang masuk ke dalam tubuh kita malah diserang. Yang disuntik itu memblokir imun biar nggak nyerang apa yang masuk. Mungkin itu kalau alergi.
Oh, ya, masuk akal sih. Jadi kayak diajarin gitu ya. Tapi
Diajarin.
Iya. Kayak diajarin ini bukan berbahaya.
Ini sistemnya kebalik sama vaksin gitu.
Iya. Ini kalau
Vaksin
yang
kan
kalau vaksin itu
membuat
kan ini berbahaya.
Iya. Kalau itu dia bikin nandain kalau itu nggak berbahaya.
Oh iya. Paham. Itu suntiknya harus cuman sekali atau harus suntik lagi?
Nah itu bisa tergantung alerginya. Misalnya alergi yang nggak signifikan. Kalau gue kan seafood dulu. Jadi kalau ada yang alergi kacang kan, nah itu udah
Oh, oke.
tergantung signifikannya.
Iya.
Signifikan apa? Sampai misalnya autoimunnya menyerang sampai bisa kulit jadi berwarna apa, bisa bengkak. Nah itu udah parah. Tapi kalau masalah gatal-gatal dikit gitu mungkin masih nggak begitu.
Oke. Adhi sama Andrea ada yang mau diceritain nggak? Atau tambahin?
Ada sih gue nggak gitu banyak cerita soal ini, karena badan gue juga nggak pernah kena kayak alergi.
Tapi lu vaksin COVID ada reaksi nggak?
Aman-aman aja, makanya gue juga bingung dan gue berpikir.
Oh gila, oke. Keren. Adi gimana? Adi.
kalau misalnya kayak alergi gitu gue jujur nggak tahu ya. Tapi nggak tahu juga ya. Gue sih nggak tahu ini alergi atau kagak. Soalnya kalau misalnya gue kayak makan kayak dark chocolate gitu yang lumayan apa ya rasanya agak berat gitu, gue tuh pusing ya. Nah gue tuh sebenarnya nggak tahu itu alergi atau kagak, karena tiap kali gue makan dark chocolate pasti gue pusing. Dan apakah itu suatu bentuk alergi di mana tubuh gue itu kayak nggak mentolerir keberadaannya dark chocolate atau apa gitu, gue juga nggak tahu ya. Tapi kalau misalnya alergi yang signifikan gitu nggak ada sih, nggak pernah gue. Dan kalau misalnya kayak vaksin covid demam ya, demam ya gimana ya jelasnya, sebentar sih lama gitu, tapi ya ringan lah saya.
Ya itu demam itu berarti kekebalan. Ya udah sih, kayaknya itu aja untuk malam ini. Jadi hari ini yang hadir itu ada Andre, Choi, Adhi sama gua ya, Emmanuel Matthew. Oke, itu dulu untuk hari ini. Makasih udah datang ya malam ini. Thank you.